older persons. Thank you. So with that intention, we are having this kind of refresher workshop for the alumni. We planned not to have a very exhaustive kind of workshop. We will start with a small uh, refresher course in terms of a kind of a workshop mode for 3 hours, and then we thought we can take it ahead into more of a panel discussion kind or other models of refresher courses. As per the program schedule, we will have a brief introduction about the program by Dr. Vajanta Anand. So Dr. Vajanta, it is over to you for welcoming our esteemed resource persons, the participants and colleagues from College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan.
Thank you, Smita. Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I'm traveling. I was hoping to reach before the program starts, but somehow I'm still traveling. So I can see many familiar faces. So, Minnie is a very dear friend of mine. And Digambar is who has done his RM from our college. So, of course, Sandesh, Swati, all of these people are there. So I would just like to say that, our alumni is rich with experience and is spread out all over the world, and they are doing a lot of work in different areas. So we as College of Social Work, we wanted to revive, strengthen and expand the alumni network, and one of the way which we wanted to do is providing some kind of refresher workshops on areas perhaps on which people are they themselves are working, they would like to work and they would like to know a little more. As Smita rightly pinpointed, aging population is something which is growing more and more. Aging population is in and around. So whichever area we are working, we do come across aging population, and sometimes because we do not understand what ageism is or what is aging and what exactly are the issues of aging population, we hesitate to reach out to them. We may not cover them, or they might be in and around, but perhaps we have not developed an understanding of how to intervene with them. So, as a background, I would like to tell you that about this particular workshop. But before I go into this particular workshop, I would like to say that we have organized series, and the first one was on disability. This one is on aging, and it will be followed by one on health, the bill which is coming in, and also there is a workshop planned on community organization. We are free for suggestions from all the alumni, and as alumni, I'm an alumni too. So all of us, we need to take it further, and probably we need to organize our own workshops and understand what we need and how we can reach out to each other as resource persons as well as participants. Now, about this particular workshop, I would like to say that a few years back, I think 2-3 years back, we had a national conference on aging, and that threw up lot of issues. And one of the things which was that we are working in various communities, we come across aging population, and we need to develop programs and we need to cover them. And one of the way Nirmala Niketan did was starting a field action project with the elderly in Bhagat Singh Nagar, Goregaon, where Swati, Sandesh, are taking it further. And one of the learnings was that, as Smita said, they are the aging population. I think I'm also approaching that particular age bracket. So all of us, we are resource banks. We are vulnerable in because we have not been taken seriously. We have lot to offer, and that is what we learned, that self help, in this particular community based intervention with the elderly in the slum, we realize that elderlies are not waiting for people to help them. They can help themselves if they are well informed, if services are reaching out to them, if their concerns are taken care of. They are not somebody who are like a liability. They're basically assets, and we need to treat them like asset. And perhaps they can contribute and they can help a lot in your social work interventions wherever you all are. And they will also be a bridge in terms of sustainability, because we don't take them seriously. So with that note, I would like to welcome each one of you for this program, and I'm glad to see a lot of faces familiar. I know Smita and we had hoped for a larger group to be there, but this is a small beginning, and later on, probably, enthusiasm will generate, and we will be able to, offer more such kind of refresher programs based on your own needs and your own demands. So thank you, Smita, for taking. Smita has really taken a lot of trouble in organizing this entire workshop. We are toiling, Cletus and Anna and all alumni executive committee. All of us have been really, trying our best to get as many alumni as possible. But all of us know alumni association is nothing if all of us alumni and people like Smita who are helping in the whole process are not proactive. So it's useless to have programs if we are not proactive. So please spread the word and reactivate and regenerate our alumni. With that word, all the best, Smita, and you can start the program. Thank you so much, and thank you for the resource persons if they have joined, for taking the time out for addressing the issues which will come up probably in this particular session. You can take over, Smita. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaju, for a very warm welcome. And you connected with the alumni who are here. So that's a warm welcome, as well as a precise introduction to what this refresher workshop is about and the topic that it is going to dwell on. Thank you so much for that. I think Mala Kapoor ji is yet to join. Let me just check. Uh, Pamela ma'am is here. Professor Pamela is here. She is the second speaker. We will wait for Professor Mala Kapoor to join. I think she will be joining by 10 a.m. Till then, we'll wait for the other participants to join in. Once she joins in, then I will give her introduction, and it will be followed by her talk during the workshop. So just hang on, participants, and we will be back in 5 minutes. I welcome Professor Pamela. She is the second speaker for the session. I welcome her.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Uh, Dear participants, Mr. Cletus from our team, he's suggesting that all of us can keep our cameras on for a minute so he can take a group picture of all of us. Yes. The other participants, Mini, Nirmiti, Prabhakar, Roshni, Samir, Sandesh, Shankar, Mr. Digambar. Could you please switch on your cameras?
Ma'am, I already on camera.
Mr. Cletus will let us know when we are supposed to like pose. Yes. Sure, sure. Thank you, Mr. Cletus. I have sent a message to the first speaker. Soon she will be joining and we can start off the refresher workshop.
Hello, everyone. Smita, I have
I'm
joined.
happy to announce that Professor Malakapu Shankardas has joined us. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Yeah.
Yes, you have to unmute yourself, Professor.
Yeah, you can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear her.
Now
I
we can hear you. Now
I
we
can
can
hear
hear you.
Yeah.
Can you increase your volume, Professor?
Okay. Is it better now?
You're able to hear her, Cletus? Oh,
Yes,
okay,
Smita, I
okay.
can
We
hear.
are able
I can
to hear you, Professor. So I am now going to proceed to introduce quickly Professor Malakapu Shankardas. All of you must already be knowing about her, but a quick bio sketch. Dr. Malakapu Shankardas is by training a sociologist, gerontologist, and health social scientist. She is international tutor with INIA, International Institute on Aging, United Nations, Malta. She, after 38 years of teaching, has retired as senior faculty in the University of Delhi, India in March 2021. She is the governing body member of Alzheimer's and Related Disorders Society of India, popularly known as ARTSI, Delhi chapter. She is the Asia representative for International Network for Prevention of Elder Abuse, and she is the founder member of Development Welfare and Research Foundation, and also is the executive member ACAP, Aging Consortium Asia Pacific. Dr. Malakapu Shankardas is known as an international consultant, an academician, a researcher, a writer, and an activist. Her work relates to the field of gerontology, sociology, health, gender, environment, and development studies. She has done and continues to do prestigious assignments for various agencies of United Nations in India and abroad. She is a member of different committees constituted by a varied ministries and institutions in the government of India. She is affiliated to international and national organizations, holding honorary positions, being a resource person and delivering lectures, keynote addresses, chairing technical sessions in various conferences. She has published 10 books on aging, chapters with reputable publishers, and has many articles in specialized journals, magazines, and newspapers. She is a recipient of fellowships and awards for her work on aging issues and for her professional commitments. Her special attention is on rights of older people, social, health, gender, and environmental concerns affecting quality of life of older persons, focusing on care aspects, empowerment, and development strategies. We have amidst us an esteemed resource person, Professor Malakapu Shankardas, and I now invite her to enlighten us with her talk. The topic being aging and demographics of older people in India. Over to you, Professor Mala.
Thank you very much, Smita. And good morning to all the alumni members, the staff, and my professional colleagues. At the outset, let me congratulate Dr. Smita for organizing. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, so let me start again. At the outset, let me congratulate Dr. Smita for organizing on regular basis very topical webinars, lectures on important issues affecting the contemporary world. And I'm happy that I've been associated with some of her programs in the past. And I look forward to more in the future too. So today's session on aging discourse is not only significant globally, but has a lot of meaning in the Indian context too. So I'm going to provide you both a global as well as an Indian perspective as we go along. And as it was highlighted, I think by Dr. Anand earlier, the session has an essence for all of us. I'm grateful to Dr. Smita and to the College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, Bombay, and the principal, Dr. Nidwin Dais, for inviting me to deliver my talk on a topic that is very close to my heart, not because it relates to my research and writings, but more so as it is of consequence to our present and the future. Now, let me take you forward by talking about what is the significance of aging in demographics and in our society and for all of us. To me, it is important that it is high time we pay attention to the demographics of aging, which is changing the complexion of all countries. The young societies like India, yes, some of us still refer to India as a young society because we still have many young people in our population, and their percentage at present is high. But what we have to also remember is that India is an aging society, like many other in South Asia or in Africa and Latin America, which from the century onwards have a percentage of older people, which as per United Nations can define us as aging societies. What I mean by this is, if I don't know how many of you are aware, but as per the UN definition, if a country has 6% population as older people, then it is called aging society. Below that, it is stated as a young society. And in this century, we did move on to having more than 6% of older people. Now, what we do see is, as these years have gone by, the last 2 decades particularly, that those countries which were aging are now moving into what is termed as aged societies, like Sri Lanka, the exception in South Asia, and more like East Asian countries, such as China, Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, Thailand, just to name few of them. And I do want to bring to your attention so that you remember that soon India will be also considered as an aged society, because in the next few decades, our percentage of older people is going to increase substantially. And this will get even more clear as we move on. And because according to the UN definition, countries beyond 7.5% of older people in its population are called aged societies. Now, what we also see is that those which were aged nations since many few years in this century, like Japan, which is the only one in Asia, but many in Europe, such as France, Germany, and Italy, are now, as we are turning into the 3rd decade of this century, are now termed as super aged societies. And what this means is that not only is the percentage high of older people, but they are living much longer. And I will elaborate a bit more on this demographic phenomena in a little while. The characteristic of all these societies is, and noticeable more from this century, is that Uh, Aging, that is the number of older people, is rising rapidly. In fact, in some of the developing countries, it is rising so rapidly that what took the European countries, which aged earlier, uh, many years to achieve a certain level of proportion of older people, in our countries, the developing countries, the countries of Asia in particular, and also some in Latin America, we are moving so rapidly that within last 20 years, the progress which has been made in the rise in proportion of older people is remarkable compared to what it took some of the European countries 50 to 60 years. And therefore, it becomes very significant when we look at the demographics and we look at the aging process, how important it is for us to keep in mind how fast we need to do something to make our aging populations more comfortable, give them more opportunities for a life of dignity and respect. So what we are finding is that while in these societies, older people population is rising very rapidly, uh, but another noticeable fact is that the number of younger people in our societies is decreasing. So it's not as if the number of young population, the segment of them is remaining constant. It's not as if, is just hypothetically speaking, if there were 50% of the population at the beginning of the century, they remain 50%. No, they are going down. So, which is meaning that the younger population is decreasing. And this phenomena of older people rising rapidly, younger people, the proportion reducing not that rapidly, but gradually and quite in a sustained manner, means that it has implications for many policy program uh, uh, dimensions, and which we need to pay attention to. And I hope you all open your mind to some of these issues. So talking a little more about how does the aging process impact societies, we find that the impact is in terms of many changes which occur in society. Of course, one of them, which I've already mentioned, is the increase in absolute and percentage of older people in the population. And here I'm talking of the absolute population. Why? Because many of the Asian countries are known for large populations. India, China, Indonesia, all of them have huge populations. So when we talk of older percentage of older people in these societies, it is talking of phenomenal number of older people. So what we find in our Indian society is that older people who comprised 6.4% of the total proportion of the population at the beginning of the century were 7.5 in 2010 and will be 11.1% in 2025. In 2025. So these are, of course, based on projections. It could be even more. Uh, but besides this, what we need to look at is also that people are living longer. So that means that we have in our societies older people with higher longevity. So people who were earlier were living up to the lifespan was, or the life expectancy was something in 50s, is now come to 60s. And recently, some of the data has shown that it has come to 68, for men and 69 or probably 70 for women in our country. And this is a phenomena which we see happening in all countries. So older people are living longer. And the implication or a sense of it, just very briefly to tell you about it, is the fact that if we look at the retirement age in most societies, it is 58, 60, or even 65 in some of them, in certain sectors of the formal sector in societies. But what are we meaning? Here is, when do people start working? They generally start working after finish their education, uh, around 25 or 30 years. So they work for, say, about 28 years or 30 years or 35 years. But if the life expectancy is rising and it is moving on to much higher age groups, that means people who are called the old or the older population or the older adults, as is now referred to in many countries, are there for about almost 30 years without work in the formal sector. Or those who are working in the informal sector also, as I will elaborate a little more, have certain health issues. So, I mean, more than your adolescent life, you could say, is anything from 0 to the young or the adolescent to 20, from 20 to 30 or uh, 32 or so is your educational life, and then working life, starting from, say, even average 30 to about 60 is 30 years. And people living longer. Now we find that with the lifespan, which has increased, life expectancy, which has increased, people in the age group of 80 years and above are many. The proportion in all countries in the population is rising. This is a demographic change, but the implication of it is that if this is happening, then people from the age from 60 to about 80, 90, 95, even 100, like Super 8 societies have many people of 100. That means more than their working life, they are in the old age bracket, so about 30 to 40 years. So this demographic change, which we notice, has, or the aging process, which is happening, has a huge impact on older people, on the demographic situation in the full country, and on many related issues. So in most societies, what we find is, why is this rapid aging process taking place? Because there are improvements in the health sector, in other social sector dynamics. There is a social change happening. There is technological change happening. There is environmental change happening, which is impacting the life of the people. But another crucial factor is, which we must note and keep in mind, is that as people live longer, that means that they're not dying young, but which is a very good thing, and we need to congratulate and celebrate aging. But when they are living longer, the question is, and this is what we need to pay attention to, is how healthy are they? And that is a big question. And as I will be talking later on the epidemiological transition also, I will show you the significance of this remark. I hope you are all with me so far. Dear participants, are you people with me on this?
Yes, Professor.
Yeah, it's making sense?
Yes.
Thank you. So how many are women and how many are, it's all ladies college, or do you have both
It's a
male and
co-education.
co-education?
And these are the alumni of our college, and we
Mm.
have almost equal participation from men and women here.
Okay, okay, you're good. because aging has to be understood in its gender dimensions.
Yes, ma'am.
And I hope you all, you must be already aware of it, because you all are doing aging course as part of your wider curriculum. Then taking my talk further, we need to understand the demographic transition in many ways. And what we really mean by demographic transition is that there is a long-term trend of declining birth and death rates, which is resulting in substantive change in the age distribution of a population. Now, while the percentage distribution of proportions of different age segments change in the population, what becomes crucial for us is to understand that the growth of aging population is happening at a faster rate, as I said. But this means that we need to quickly and in a very sustained and forward-looking manner think about policies and programs which can contribute to the well-being of older people. We don't have much time, because the moment we have something ready, we find that the proportion of older person has increased more than to what we can cater on. So what we are finding in India, we had 91.6 million older people in 2010. There was an annual addition of 2.5 million older people between 2005 and 2010. And the number of them is projected to reach 158.7 million in 2025. I mean, look at the number of people who will be old in our country. This is equivalent to the total population of certain countries, especially in Europe. So here, where countries plan for the full society, we have to plan in a more serious way for smaller segments of that population. And this is a very important factor to be kept in mind. And now, what we also need to keep in mind is that in the next couple of decades, something which I referred to right in the beginning, older people will surpass the population of children below 14 years, which means that there will be less children, more older people. But what significance this has is that the working age population will increase for a long time in many of the developed countries. Since you have been students who have done aging issues, you would understand the pyramids, the shape, which is reflective of the population. But the concern is not so much with what shape it has, but rather with the implications it has for our society. And that will be that the working people or the working age population has to support both younger and older generations. And especially in countries where we find that we don't have enough social mechanisms, we don't have enough services which cater to all generations. So looking at the demographics of older people, we find that another fact which needs attention is that nowhere in any country is the uniform distribution of older persons across regions. There is difference in terms of development in various parts and regions. So for instance, in India, as in many other countries too, we see different levels of economic development, cultural norms, provision of services, and also the political context within which birth and death rates are impacted, which leads to variations in demographic transitions. So we find that the population structures in North India are different from South, west or east or central parts of the country. And further, every state has its own reality. Even cities and villages have different demographics. And all this has significant impact on the lives of older people, which I will be referring to in my talk. And just imagine, can we have one uniform policy where we are talking of certain programs for older people or for younger generation? Clearly, no, because the dynamics of every state in terms of their socio-economic complexion is different, and culturally also. So we need to keep this in mind, and therefore how tough and important it is to suit everything for the context of older people. So the state, talking of the state variations in population structures, we find that some of the southern states, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, are considered the biggest drivers of aging in India. They have larger proportion of older people, which may not be in absolute numbers compared to other states, but definitely in terms of percentage. And the point which I want you to take into account is these are also the states which are known for having high level of migration of working age population. So the implication of it can be quite acute for us. And I hope you can, because you're familiar with all these phenomena, can make those connections. Other Indian states like Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Maharashtra, Orissa, Punjab are also experiencing aging population boom. And what needs to be kept in mind is that these states are highly populated, more than the southern states. So they need to have programs which take this into account. And yes, they have comparatively lower proportion of older people compared to southern states, but in absolute numbers, older people surpass the numbers of certain southern states. And also, many of the states all over the country have more older people living largely in rural areas, which again is a very significant factor when we look at the country level dynamics. And a crucial component of aging populations all over the world and also in India is the process of feminization of aging, which means that the proportion of older people is higher than the proportion of older men. And you must be familiar with this. So you must be also sensing that what serious implications this particular dynamics can have on the lives of aging men and women as it relates to their health and social status in societies. And it also has certain very important dimensions which have to be kept in mind when we talk of care aspects, when we talk of accessibility aspects, when we talk of enabling environments, when we talk of elder abuse issues, when we talk of various constraints which exist in societies in terms of ageism, in terms of various disadvantages which people face. So all this, please do keep in mind as we discuss this topic. And I do want to say a little bit about epidemiological transition also, which is taking place along with the demographic transition, because we need to connect the two. And what we do see is, and what is becoming noticeable and impacting aging populations in many significant ways, um, on the lives of older men and women, is this impact of the epidemiological transition. Because the transition epidemiological describes changing patterns of population age distributions, their mortality, the fertility, life expectancy, the disease prevalence, and incidences and causes of death. And when we look at the broader issues of healthcare, of social care, this epidemiological factors play an important role. And more specifically, epidemiology is concerned with the distribution of disease and death and with their determinants and consequences in population groups. It's just to make you more aware of certain correlations, of certain interrelations, of certain dynamics of aging issues, the process and the demographics and the epidemiology. So what we find is when a higher percentage of the population reaches the adult age and develops adult-related diseases, what the epidemiology teaches us or makes us aware of, then our concern is to understand the impact of biological factors, environmental factors, social, cultural, and behavioral factors, and the practices of modern or other systems of medicine on the lives of older people. What are the linkages between epidemiology and demography comes alive when we open our minds to these factors, and the linkages become impactful when we look at how do adult related diseases affect adult age experiences and lives. Does it increase morbidity? Does it impact on caring services? Does it impact on the provision, the need for provision of health and social care services? Does it lead to frailty? And therefore, connected to this in availability of services and provisions? And more importantly, how do we assess this correlation? So, understanding the meaning of the correlation, what we are really concerned about is how does the epidemiological transition move from infectious diseases to chronic diseases? And how does this impact, or rather move, translate from high mortality and infectious diseases to high morbidity and mortality connected with chronic and age-related diseases? We all know that when we are talking of old age, mortality is one aspect, but morbidity is another aspect, and we have to pay attention to both. In aging societies, we find older people dying more from degenerative diseases. And this is very pivotal for health and social policies in every country, including ours. Briefly, it calls for more programs for non communicable disease management. And lately, with the COVID, we have also seen how both infectious diseases and non communicable diseases had such a drastic impact on our populations, and especially on older people, and what kind of preparedness or management we had in the country calls for us paying attention to some of these issues from a very serious concern. So we need to take forward the context of all this, and we need to keep in mind that certain demographic and epidemiological features are very important for our discussion today. And while I do refer specifically to the Indian context, but these dimensions actually apply in many Asian countries, for that matter, for many developing countries, whether they are in the African continent or Latin American continent and so forth. So giving more specific data from India, but a similar data is available in other countries too, but which I don't have time to make a comparative analysis, and that's also not the point of this discussion today. Maybe some other time, maybe Smita is listening and we have a more holistic world view on some of these issues. But talking now of noteworthy points are bringing to your attention that of the 7.5 percentage of the aging population, two-thirds in our country live in villages, and nearly half are of poor socioeconomic status, what we call SES, SES, and half of older people are dependents, often due to widowhood, divorce, separation, and a majority are older women, as much as some studies have, or some data has indicated 70% of them. So look at the huge um, cost it has for the society, how the percentage of dependence on the economy, on families, on communities is so high. No doubt what some of my studies in recent times are showing the contribution which older people are making to society and how we need to recognize them as a resource and not so much as a dependent. And a lot of my work is now changing this mindset which we need to have about talking of demographics, because what we need to understand when we are talking of epidemiological transition and we are talking of longer lifespans, we are talking of higher life expectancies, that is also indicating that when people are living longer, they're also living healthier lives. Yes, the chronic diseases, they're prone to become more as you live longer. But at the same time, there are people which we need to now recognize, bring in our data, look at it in terms of how resourceful they are, how much they're caring or they are being looked at as caregivers in societies, in families. But I'll be talking um, little more of that in between now and then. But in as an issue, what we need to cannot ignore is uh, uh, the dynamics of people who are living alone, who need care, and this is also increasing as the demographics of older people is changing. And among those who are living alone, more are women. Of course, it's talking of their resilience too. But in terms of data, in terms of reality, we cannot miss the point that there is a very considerable gender dimension to the aging process. So we need to keep in mind that many old people reside in rural areas, in remote areas, belong to lower socioeconomic groups, or have socioeconomic status, low status. And even though, yes, they are managing their lives, but we definitely need to improve their lives. We definitely need to look at their lives from a right-based approach. And that is the idea of presenting this data to you, which at times seems a bit depressing. But it's a fact, because we need to do much more for our older populations, for our aging segment of the population, because many of them are dependent upon their families. And when I say dependent, it does not mean that they are useless or they don't do anything or they are not a resource. When we say dependent, it could also be that emotionally, economically, because our country does not have a universal social security system. They don't have pensions. They don't have employment opportunities. And those who continue to work in old age are working in very poor and hazardous conditions in the informal sector, in the agriculture sector, out of compulsion. So there is an intermix of these dimensions which has to be kept in mind. And therefore, they become dependent on the families. And also another factor of dependency is the fact that the literacy levels are low. The present lot of older people has very low literacy level. they are not equipped technologically at all. And COVID taught us how we had to, some of us who were working with older people, how we had to train them to various different technological devices, to social media, to various other facilities through the internet and so forth. And many of you are already aware of it. But also, what we need to keep in mind is that the full complexion of older people, in spite of their strength, in spite of their resilience, in spite of them being a resource to families, we cannot ignore that they also require proper care by families, by communities, and societies. And I'm glad Smita has kept the next session to highlight some of these things. And you, as part of a social work ideology and programs, are open your mind to many of these aspects. So the point which I want to stress on is that we need robust government policies for health and social security of older people, as these are extremely relevant when we talk of demographics of older people, when we talk of the aging process. And I do want to touch a little bit further on what does research tell us about older people. Although, yes, some of our new research, of which I am part, we are looking at different dimensions. But what is the national surveys of our country? The National Sample Survey, and now a detailed study by LASI, that is the Longitudinal Aging Survey of India, which is looking at a very large scale population of older people covering India across the various states, is providing very useful data on the health and social status of older people. And the data which is emerging is quite similar to the position which older people have in many other countries, which is to say that in terms of what the governments are doing, what the families are doing is limited, and we need to do more. But in terms of the strength of older people, how they survive, how they cope, we need to recognize their potential and resource. And some of my work, and as well as the new work which is coming, is looking at this potential and how we need to widen our scope when we are looking at older people. So we know that older people live in precarious health and social conditions. But what we need to look at is how we can empower them to be a bigger resource, how we can include their contributions in economy. It is true that they have a high prevalence of risky behavior. And when I say risky behavior, because some of their activities relate to which makes them at risk for various health problems and social issues in terms of their physical activities, in terms of the mental activities, and in terms of social activities. Very briefly, if we talk of physical activities, we don't have enough open spaces where older people can comfortably go and exercise. We don't have many provisions which can take care of their mental health issues, loneliness, isolation, so forth. So we don't have much happening in societies where social interactions can take place. Yes, we do have in villages older people sitting out in the open mixing, but that's more with men than women, although that is also being noticed now that women also in some of their activities come together in religious and so forth. But what we need to do is to identify all these and what influences they have on lives of older people. We find senior citizen associations coming up, which is providing quite a bit of relief. But what we also need to look is to capture all this in terms of availability of data, which can be shared. So we need more increase in the reports of ailments, utilization of healthcare services among older people, more data on their access to services, and whether it is uniform across the country or it's in a differential manner and so forth. And also we need to look at what is the burden of ailments on older people, what kind of illnesses, sicknesses, what kind of injuries they have. I mean, we are still capturing data about the falls in older people, which is a very high risk issue with aging. And also we need to look at the gender differentials, the residential differentials, which become very important. And we know that as chronic illnesses are growing in all countries because of the epidemiological transitions, cardiovascular problems, circulatory diseases, cancers, put older people at a higher risk than younger people who are more at risk for infectious and parasitic diseases. And but in developed countries, this is more earmarked in terms of the differences. But in developing countries, we are still going through a lot of infectious problems, disease problems, and there is a very intermixing of the demographic and epidemiological transitions. And what we are not being able to pay more attention, which we urgently need to, is talk a little more of lifestyle-based diseases and disabilities, which affect older people. So we need to understand the disease patterns of older people, their degenerative disorders, the metabolic systems, and as well as be aware of the communicable diseases, the virals, especially like we saw the COVID-19 pandemic. All these are important things where we cannot forget that older people are also vulnerable. And all these multiple chronic diseases and infectious diseases have more serious impact on them, because that's another fact we need to recognize, that yes, as people are growing older, they do have stronger immunity and so forth, but they are also at greater risk for certain chronic problems of high blood pressure, kidney problems, digestive disorders, vision problems, obesity related issues, or metabolic related issues, and so forth, and which may not affect the mortality so much, but it does increase the prevalence of morbidity, and which then makes them a little more prone or weaker for infectious diseases. And this kind of correlation between them, along with its intersectionality with gender, areas of residence, socio-economic status, has to be kept in mind. So the concerns which we need to look at is um, the fact that we must relate how the non-communicable diseases is increasing, bringing in related disabilities, which require enabling environments, which require more steps from the countries and from various local level and regional level initiatives in terms of providing services, provisions, and so forth. And I mean, this is in the context that for many developing countries, including India, the health budget is low, health services are limited, geriatric care is underdeveloped. Although, yes, we have a healthcare program for older people, but we still have to put it in place in a uniform manner, covering or universally people who require services. And also community provisions need greater care. And like I said, the next speaker, my friend Pamela Singh, is going to speak of many of these issues. And I'm glad that my topic is going to take you to the next one. And we need to look at it from a holistic, integrated perspective. And we, of course, need more research data to establish these correlations. But importantly, and since it connects with the next topic also, I quickly want to say something about the burden of care, which we see in our societies. That is that the care, holistic care of older people, which is should be provided to them from a right-based approach, um, um, makes very unique demands on the country's public health care system. And we find that there are many issues which come. So it is not just providing health care, but we also need to see that how older people come out of the poverty situation, how they come out of the debt situation. So social security measures are important. And another factor which I feel extremely strongly about is that we don't have enough training to take care of older people, and especially when older people are living longer. I mean, I find, and it's very disturbing to see families responding very negatively to dementia, to memory loss in older people, to getting cataract operations, to getting dentures, getting assistive technologies for older people. And we find active aging policies are missing from our societies, from our communities. And I find that social security measures which are existent in our country don't really support older people. I mean, if you look around, how many provisions we have which make travel comfortable for older people, which improves their incomes in old age, which improves their adaptability to technological developments and so forth. And also, we must understand, and a point which I keep emphasizing, especially for a large country like India, and especially for many regions in the world, that there are regional and social disparities which need to be taken into account. And the reality of older people is that yes, there are privileged individuals among older people now, because the middle class among older people is also increasing. Many people are doing comfortably. Many people who have retired from the private sector because they are living longer from the government sector are experiencing better living conditions. But there are still, because of the increasing numbers of older people, many who are living in the worst imaginable conditions. And we need to remove these barriers for them. And we need to take into account the nuclearization of families, the dependency among generations, which is changing its complexion in societies, and the various kinds of uh, inequities which continue to exist on the basis of gender, caste, and religion. And we find that all these factors become important when we look at the elderly population, because they are not receiving care as much. And I'm talking of care here in a very large, wider, holistic context, in terms of what they deserve and what they should be entitled to. And we need to make many things physically accessible to older people. We need to reduce costs of many things, and we need to increase the provisions for silver economy in our country, because the reality of the Indian society, the demographics is showing that the aging populations are increasing, and we need more products, consumable items which are affordable and meet their needs. So, talking of lastly, just to end it all about challenges and future concerns, yes, we have challenges in the domains of access, affordability, and these need to be addressed in terms of environmentally friendly designs and strongly implementation of social and healthcare programs and policy which are favorable for older people. And a lot of research gaps need to be removed and minimized. And therefore, I would recommend some of you who are who have passed out and who are involved with various futuristic programs to talk about more on terms of what should be the health system research, what kind of policies there should be, what kind of non-governmental organizational work there should be, and how do we place older people in all that. And yes, certain very interesting provisions have come in the country, like when we are talking of the silver economy, we are starting with many aged care facilities. We are looking at various types of travel insurance, health insurance. We are looking at developing geriatric services. We are looking at courses of geriatric nursing. We are looking at geriatric social work. We are looking at mental health issues of older people. We are opening ourselves, but much more we need to do under this. And especially when we take the broader framework or the policy directions of universal health coverage, a framework of sustainable development goals, of the Madrid International Action with which I have recently been involved, we need to pay more attention. And these are all very pertinent aging issues. So I end here. Thank you very much. And I would have to leave soon, but I can quickly take few more comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mala. I think the topic that Professor Mala has been given is a very vast and complicated one, but she did complete justice to it in terms of systematically talking about the demographics of the elderly, giving us very updated information and helping us make sense of what are the implications of these demographics of older people, not only in the global context, but also in India and at the state level. And also she touched upon the epidemiological concerns in terms of aging older persons and, what are the observations made through epidemiological studies. She also briefed us about the different the research that is taking place and what information and directions that is giving to us, and what more are the areas or topics of research that needs to be taken up in the area of aging and elderly. And finally, she touched upon certain very important issues or specific concerns that the elderly are facing, and therefore she has set a ground for the next speaker, which is Professor Pamela, to actually talk about how social workers can intervene with the older people, certain issues that they are facing. So I'm really thankful, immensely grateful to Professor Mala. If there are some questions that the participants would like to ask, I requested that they can ask in the chat. So
Actually,
there is
Smita, that would be better because I also need to rush. I'm sorry, I have another commitment.
okay.
So unless there is something very important in terms of urgent clarification, if there are only comments and all, you can share with them. Yeah, you can share with me. Yeah.
To participants, are there any questions that you would want to ask Professor Mala? I understand that the content of her talk is more of information and knowledge based, but still if there are any comments or questions, please feel free to ask. We have around 5 to 10 minutes. You can put your hand up or you can directly ask the question. I know Professor is due for another meeting, but I'm sure maybe 1 or 2 queries she will answer. Anyone?
I also want to say that if some of you are still going through the thoughts of the presentation and all, I don't know if Smitha is open to it, but you people could get in touch with Smitha, who could then get in touch with me, and we could take forward some of the discussions or some of the clarifications and all, because very often it does happen that immediately certain things don't come to mind, but when we dwell on it, reflect on it, then certain things become significant and appear, and you want to comment on it. So you are free to even come back. I'm open to Smita's dialogue with her later also. Please don't hesitate.
Yeah. So I think there are no questions or comments. So we will conclude this session here. Thank you very much, Professor Mala Kapoor. And if you are able to join later on at the end of Pamela's session at the beginning, you are welcome to do that.
Yeah, in a little while, yes, maybe I will reconnect. So that would be nice to be, yeah. And thank you so much for having me. And it was a pleasure giving my discourse on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Yes. Okay, so Professor has finished the lecture within 1 hour, and I was hoping that there would be some questions and that would take another 10-15 minutes. Because that is not the case, I will see whether our next speaker is ready to start her talk now.
Yeah, I am here, Smita.
Okay. Yes, Professor. So before Professor Pamela starts her interaction with all of us, I would like to quickly introduce her, a very distinguished resource person that we have here, Pamela Singla.
Smita, can I just intervene? I'm glad Pamela is already there. Hello, Pamela. Good
Hi,
to have you here as part of the session. And maybe I will join in to listen to you in between. I have to immediately attend to something, but I will come back.
Yeah, perfectly fine. And I was personally thinking, I might not even take that long because of certain reasons which Smita knows, and I might just say it out when I'm talking. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Smita, you.
Thank you. Yeah. So
sorry to interrupt. Yeah, carry on, please.
No worries. Absolutely okay. So we have Professor Pamela Singla. She is the head of department at Department of Social Work, University of Delhi. Some of the subjects that she has been teaching include social work, gender studies, and social policy. I request all of you to mute yourself. So some of the subjects she has been teaching are social work education, gender studies, and social policy. Over the past 30 years, when she has been teaching at the university, her research has explored various issues of concern, such as women's participation in the Panchayati Raj, women in the corporate world and their job satisfaction, safe university campus, impact of natural disasters, human trafficking, also topics like manual scavenging, welfare schemes for different groups, and she also has engaged in gender sensitization programs for diverse groups, including the Kashmir policy on soft skills. Kashmir Police Force on soft skills. Professor Pamela is associated with the Government of India in various ways. To include few of her associations, she is a member of the expert panel at task force constituted by the governor for women's safety in Delhi. She is also a member the program advisory committee Kiran program of Government of India. She is NOC member for international adoption for CARA, Government of India, and she is the visitors nominee of JNU Executive Committee and Court. Some of her administrative achievements include that she has been former warden and provost of the International Students' House for Women, Delhi University. She has recently been elected as the board member of International Association of Schools of Social Work and is the international consultant for social work at Samarkand University, Uzbekistan. A very distinguished, renowned social work educator and academician we have amongst us. And Professor will be talking on social work interventions that can be taken up with older people in the Indian context. Over to you, Professor Pamela.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you. And a very good morning to everyone present here with us today. And I'm really grateful to Smita and also Professor Mala for introducing me to such a vibrant alumni of Nirmala Niketan. And the topic, as Smita just said, that has been given to me, social work intervention with the older persons, the elderly. And I actually was sharing with Smita today. I said I myself am today in the last 1 week, I realized the whole, this crisis that the elderly might face, especially, in the context that we are living in nuclear families. And so myself in a state of crisis, but then, this was a commitment. So I definitely wanted to interact with all of you with some of the experiences, my own learnings over a period of time. So, yes, so Professor Malada Kapoor has given a complete insight into the theme and has actually covered the entire topic holistically, also reflecting on the kind of social work interventions that could be made. So it becomes easier for me to carry it forward. And yes, and I congratulate Smita and the entire team of Nirmala Niketan, Smita and her team. And also, I think Professor Anand was there in the morning. She also spoke about it. I think this is a wonderful initiative by you and a good way to also connect with the alumni. So we at the Department of Social Work, we also make an effort to connect with our alumni, and recently we've got our alumni registered. In fact, I can see on the screen someone is there, and I think other alumni from the department also, I'm sure, will be there. So someone.
Hello, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning, someone. Good morning. So
Nice to see you. Yes.
So just a minute. Yeah. So yes. Right. So it's really a nice initiative by the institute, and I remember having visited Nirmala Niketan a long time back, way back in 1990s, and I still carry some wonderful memories of the institute. And next time, definitely, when I'm going to be in Mumbai, I'm going to meet Smita and her team and learn more about what all is happening. So as has been said by, so I'm going to pick up certain things which Mala has already said, because it makes my work easier. I also had certain, there were certain points in common. And yeah, so social work with the elderly is extremely relevant area. And I'm realizing that myself, now that I am nearing 60 years, and I do realize the importance of this area, something that I probably did not consider much in maybe a decade or maybe 2 decades back, but definitely it's an extremely relevant area otherwise for each one of us. And since I'm expected to be speaking on social work interventions, a very important area for social workers, both academicians and practitioners. And as per the report, because Professor Mala has shared quite a bit of data, good data analysis has also been done by her, but a bit of data sharing I'll also be doing. And as per the report by UNFPA and HelpAge International, we have the head office here in Delhi. So a report by them 2012, it says that globally the older population, that is 60 years and above, is expected to increase substantially by 2050, representing an increase from 12% to 22% of the total population during this period. And as per the available data, by 2050, there will be 2.03 billion people aged 60 years and above. And Mala did also talk about, did give us an overview of some of the, the situation in some of these countries. And Japan is currently the only country with 30% of the population in the age group of 60 years and above. And by 2050, 64 countries are likely to fall in that category as per the information that I have collected from some of these sources. And in India, while the proportion of elderly in the total population is nearly 7.5%, as per the situational analysis of elderly in India 2011 report by HelpAge, it's also projected to rise to 12.4% of the country's population by 2026. And according to NIST, the total population of elderly present in India is 10.4 crore. So the point is that, as the number of the elderly in the country and globally is increasing, definitely it becomes a point of concern that there are paradigm changes which make them appear more into the active aging bracket. So hence the urgent need to address the needs of this growing population. And the question gets to be, why does the situation require an urgent attention? What is so serious about the situation? And why really do we need to have workshops which talk about interventions for the elderly? Because we know that we have had a family system where the elderly were taken care of. So the point is that aging, which is a universal phenomena cutting across temporal boundaries and a phase of life which is marked, has a phase of life which is marked by fear of illness, something that I think many of us are going through, fear of illness, fear of immobility. Declining looks, we might ignore it, but for some of us it becomes important. And declining looks can also become an emotional situation which needs addressal, dependency, isolation, and many more aspects which makes each one of us entering the age of maybe 50, fear for old age. And the fear being more in the case of women, because gender differentials, as Mala said, we do have gender differentials. So the fear being more in the case of women who face aggravated problems of health, also because of the limited mobility. And I also like to say that, those of us who were born in the 1960s and before, we have been an eyewitness to the joint family system, which we visited during our summer vacations from school. These joint family systems are both at the maternal and paternal families and comprised of members. So they had members right from the newly born to the elderly. And believe me, the elderly men and women enjoyed a space of respect and they were in command. And they had a good life till the end of their lives. And death of an elderly was seen as a very personal loss for the family, to the extent that we would agree with it, that grown-ups, the family members would wail and remark that they are now something like an orphan. In other words, the Indian joint family system was well developed to take care of the needs of every member of the family, and the social fabric, this social fabric has changed with globalization, leading to migration and breaking of the joint family systems into the nuclear family systems. So the point then gets to be that in such a situation, the role of social work fraternity, because we at the Department of Social Work, we do get together and talk about, since most of the family members, the department fraternity, we are also in that sensitive age. So we do get together and we feel that social workers have really an important role to play in the society, and especially when it comes to addressal of the needs of the elderly. And most of the time, somewhere we feel that, especially in context of Delhi, the social workers are not really called in case there is a need. Do we really know that there is somebody like a social worker who is maybe just some furlongs away and can be called when there is a need? It's nothing like that. So social workers are not really called, and maybe we really need to create a situation where they become indispensable, where their help, where their presence is required. And when I say this, I like to begin with, when I'm talking about the role of social workers in social work intervention with the older persons, I like to begin with women per se. So when we're talking about the older persons, I feel that it's very important to listen to the women's concerns, as they have personal narratives. They look at situations differently than men. So it gets to be really important. As a study done by Lekha in 2012, it says that, and Mala has also said that as per this mentioned report, out of the few challenges faced by aging population, feminization of aging is one area that needs addressal, because women tend to live longer than men. Women, it is said, constitute 55% of the aging population, and as high as 58% of them live in the developing countries. And by 2025, nearly 75% of the world's elder women are expected to reside in what is today's called the developing world. The challenges for aging women are many, and it just comes to my mind that Mary Wollstonecraft also says that looks at women as the second sex, and implying, what does this mean? Implying basically that women are subjugated and are deprived of some of the basic fundamental rights by way of resources. And with age, this deprivation gets of further concern, and more so when the women tend to lose their husbands and become victims of increased dependency. To add to this, the larger number of older women outliving their spouse is bound to impact their living arrangements at a very late stage of life, which is of much more concern, because by that time they would carry additional burden of ill health and various kinds of disabilities. So due to this gendered nature of our societies, women are dependent on their spouses and their families, and living without a spouse further puts them in a high state of dependency on their families. So this gets to be definitely an area of concern. And when I talk about social work intervention, I would put this as an important area which needs intervention. That is, it's very important to listen to, number one, narratives of women per se, but when it comes to the elderly, listen to the women's narratives of the elderly women, because they look at things differently. So at Department of Social Work, and I'm sure at Niketan, which also has a very vibrant Department of Social Work, as a part of our training, we have the Harvard analysis frameworks. The Harvard analysis frameworks, they are basically tools that can be very useful in understanding situations from the gender lens. And basically, they uncover the gender relations by way of who owns what, who has access to resources, and not only just access, the more important part is who has control over resources. And when we talk about the gender analysis frameworks, there are various kinds of frameworks which we train our students into, especially the course on women's welfare development or gender relations. So there's this complete topic, and I would suggest that, we can also think of having diploma or certificate courses into such kind of themes, where as has been said, that we basically need training into some of these topics, so that we can address the gender relations aspect right from the beginning, maybe as a preventive measure. So there are the there's the Harvard analytical framework that has been developed by Harvard. There is the social relations framework by Naila Kabir. There is the Moser gender planning framework, the equality and empowerment framework by Sarah Longway. So there are some of these frameworks which have been developed over a period of time, and a combination of these can be used to address the concerns of women and men also, but primarily I'm talking about women. Now, as I say this, I'd also like to share with you experience from my own field work, where this study I had conducted with Poonch. This is basically to put across the fact that it's important to look at situations from a gender lens. So I remember I had gone into the interiors of Madhya Pradesh, and there was the Bega community with whom I was interacting. So Gunj is an NGO which uses cloth as a parallel currency to money. And for any infrastructure that is built, they partner with local NGOs, and for any infrastructure that is built, instead of money, instead of the currency, they give cloth. And it's a big sack. I think things have further been improvised, because in that sack, it's the family as a unit is taken as a member of five members in a family, husband, wife, and of course 3 children. And then the cloth is given, keeping in mind that a household is contains five members. And recently they've also started giving utensils and other eatables. So I was more interested to study and look into how the whole effort of Gunj is being perceived by the community which is taking the cloth, the beneficiaries, how they are perceiving this entire effort of Gunj. So the Bega community is one of the communities where they are working. So cutting it short, the point is that, when I went there, of course, when Mala was saying gender differentials, residential differentials, lifestyle-based diseases, of course, regional and social disparities. So one area that, one aspect that we face a bit of, a challenge, we face an area where we have to deal with situations like the language barrier. And our own work has shown us that it's very important to know the language of the other side, especially the beneficiaries. So anyway, we had taken the translators along, and I realized that when I asked them that how is this being seen, are you happy with the kind of cloth you're getting? So they were the men and the women from the community, and after it took some time before they could actually open up, and the men said they are happy. And then the coordinator of Gunj, who was looking into that aspect, that a particular area, he said, "Okay, madam, let's go." So the men have, the community is very happy with the work of Gunj. But for me, it was very important to also. Sorry. Yeah. So for me, it was very important to also see how the women, the elderly women who were there, and of course the young women who were standing there, how do they perceive the work by Gunj. It took us some time before they started speaking, and contrary to what the men had said. So the point I'm trying to put across is that when we're talking about interventions in the society, it's very important to look at things with the gender lens. So it might take some time. So the women took some time to open up, and then the whole issue that came up was that the clothes that they're getting are not suitable to their specific geographical location, because they are tribals, they have to work. So getting the dresses, maybe like churidars or maybe like suits, does not really suit them. Number one. Number two, even the saris that they were getting, we asked them to, they said they're not very happy with the saris they're getting. So we asked them to show us the brand new saris, 5.5 meters. But then we realized when they told us, they showed us their saris, that they need cotton and they need strong saris and maybe around 6.5 meters long, because since they are working in the field, they need to carry their children around. In fact, I have taken some pictures out, which I, as I said, because of my own rush of work, I could not bring them here. So they tie their children behind their back when they are working in the field. And that is the kind of information I needed, and probably we would need when we're talking about working with people in the community. So gender lens gets to be very important for analyzing any situations, because women look at the same situation differently, and they have their own narratives which are important to be addressed. Definitely, as Ismail also said, isolation is one of the aspects that needs, is an area of concern, because of the same point that I just said, that women get highly dependent in their vulnerable age, and they suffer from emotional alienation, which is more than their male counterparts, probably due to also the limited mobility, where they are more into the caregiving role, looking after children, looking after the elderly in the home, and so on. Having said this, I move to the, so the point is that definitely social work interventions are required, but we need more of training into this aspect, more of ethical considerations that need to be kept in mind when we are working with people in the community. Then another area that we've been talking about from the perspective of social workers is that the role of social workers needs visibility, especially in cities like Delhi, because there are definitely regional and geographical disparities. But when it comes to Delhi, I'd like to say that the role of social workers definitely needs visibility. And it goes without saying that social workers have an important role, but it needs to be also recognized by the society. So one of the models of field work that I'm sure most of us would know that at the when we talk about masters in social work or maybe bachelors, so we have fieldwork as an integral part of the entire curriculum. So for example, at the Department of Social Work, Delhi University, we have 4 days of classes and 2 days of fieldwork where the students go into the community or the agency, which is given to them for both the semester, that is for full 1 year. So one of the models of fieldwork that the schools of social work can propagate, adopt and propagate is to prepare a list of elderly couples in respective areas and place at least 30% of the students to work for the elderly with, of course, modalities worked out by the fieldwork unit of the social work departments. For example, those who are placed in the community, they can identify the senior citizens who are staying there and look into, the how they are staying, their life, the status that they have, how they are being treated, and number one. Number two, we could also place students in the old age home for elderly, and yes, maybe also some of them could be placed in government settings so that during the group conferences there is an exchange of information, there is an exchange of ideas, and students in totality learn what exactly needs to be done when with the senior citizens. So that's the second aspect that I'd like to say. One is, of course, women's narrative. Second is that we need to, have situations as a part of our need to make policy decisions at the level of the this entire social work fraternity or at the level of individual departments, that a certain percentage of students can be placed in the areas where they get to work with the elderly. For example, at the department, I'm trying to work this out with the fieldwork director, that a certain percentage of students be placed in maybe old age homes, or maybe if they are being placed in the community, we could have like study groups where we, after a certain maybe interval of time, we can get together and see what is the kind of need that social workers have. Then yes, so another aspect is towards would be community care. So the presence of elderly couple in the staying alone should be taken seriously by the residents. And this is something I've seen since I stay in the university area and often visit my relatives who are not in the university area. I've heard, for example, people saying that there are situations where in the neighborhood there is an elderly couple and they do not have people to talk. And they come and sit in the parks, and whosoever passes by, they'd like to, for example, if they get to know that there's the milkman there, so they would like the person to sit and talk to them. So the point is that if there is elderly couple staying alone, the neighborhood should take them seriously, and there should be probably a laid down rule to visit them in turns, depending on the convenience of people who are in the neighborhood. For example, I'd like to share with you here that my own PhD guide, she's a very well-known person, Professor Ratna Verma, who passed away just a few years back. She was very well cared for by the family and with the best support at her disposal. Now, during my visit, just maybe just a few months before her death, when she was staying in Pune, she shared about her accommodation. And when I went there, I thought it was the bestest colony that she had been provided with. But she told me that her previous colony, which was not that good as this one, but that colony was much better, because the reason was that people from the neighborhood would just drop in and ask about her well-being. And there were women who would come, they would sing together bhajans, and children would drop in anytime. And so there was more of the community feeling, which probably she needed at that particular age. So I recall her sharing that, the children would come, they would sing songs, they would narrate poems, and they would sort of, so it was something that was not there in the new area we had shifted. She had to shift out because the landlord said that, because of his own personal reasons, he needed that house. So my point is that this kind of a community care, each one of us need to be aware about. And as social workers, I think we are more sensitive to this, and we need to really strengthen this. And this is a fallout of the point that I've just made, that especially as interns, if we are placed in such settings, we can probably create such a care system. Then, of course, as has been mentioned, the role of the resident welfare associations. Now, it's very important that the social workers who are maybe residents or as interns, which I'm talking about, along with the RWAs, they keep a database of the senior citizens in the particular area. And it's not just the database of the elderly, but also a sex-wise breakup is very important. And that is something that we might tend to ignore. But a sex-wise breakup of the data is very important to know how many, of course, men and women are there, and how many women are staying alone or men are staying alone. So facilities like, having got such a data, then I think facilities like intercoms, readily available helpline numbers, and numbers of the neighbors should be made available, especially to the, of course, everyone should be having this kind of a list, but it's very important that the senior citizens who are staying there, they need to have access to such a database so that they can access this at the time of the internship, at the time of their, crisis. So that gets to be another aspect where social work intervention can be made, and something like this we are also trying through our students who are placed in the different settings. Then there could be a compulsory placement of young boys and girls as part of the community service to be placed in the home for elderly. I've spoken about at the master's level, but otherwise also there could be as a part of the school curriculum, like the SUPW courses, and part of the school, or maybe at the undergraduate also, there could be something like compulsory placement of the students in the home for elderly, home for elderly, and yes, so that I think could also work out very well, but that needs to be also planned well. And of course, we've heard the previous speakers speak about holistic services. Very rightly said that it's not only just one aspect, that's the health part, but something that I'm also realizing that in case this kind of services, these kind of services have to be provided, it has to be holistically by way of even multi-purpose senior citizen services. That would include, also access to meals, which you might just think that, this is assumed that they would be able to cook, but there has to be, it will be good in case we can have access to meals, we can have access to healthcare from a recognized healthcare center, hospitals. She spoke about the PHCs. And then something like, services could also include reading or reading books or maybe newspapers, or simply giving a talk or exchanging a conversation, so where the elderly can vent out their feelings, especially the women. Again, I emphasize that. So this gets to be very important. And somewhere social workers could be doing this well because of the kind of 2-year training that they go through, which emphasizes on ethical considerations, which emphasizes on importance of communications, emphasizes on ability to listen patiently to what the other person is trying to say. Then another aspect that could be considered is, before one approaches the age of retirement, is that like-minded families can book their houses together in housing societies, where, post-retirement, this would help in providing each other with the required support system. And I remember in one of my visits abroad, I remember having met this person who said that he was from Kerala. And he said that some of us have got together and we have taken this entire area and we're getting our houses constructed next to each other, because this would be very much needed in the old age when the children have moved out, because in the Indian setting, unlike in the Western setting, the children tend to stay with us, till late, and it becomes it comes as a jerk, when they leave, and then there's a vacuum that has to be filled up. So I think something like this can be thought of, maybe right in the at the time when we are still in active service, where we can think of staying together like a commune, like a community. And then it's also very important that whenever we can, as youngsters, we also take out time to be with our relatives who are seniors, like our elderly mother, our aunts, and even people who are in the neighborhood who need attention. Because just a visit and showing our face and engaging in maybe a few minutes conversation goes a long way in building up their, boosting up their sentiments. Then, of course, religious institutions like church, temples, gurdwaras, they could also be asked to run old age home for the elderly, because of the kind of sentiments the religious institutions have. They might be very successful in such kind of a endeavor. Then we as social workers have also been thinking that very fine, we could introduce such initiatives, but somewhere, incentives could also be a great motivation to be working in this direction. Hence, a database can be created to check the longevity and health of our senior citizens, and accordingly, the families and the RWAs can be honored for taking good initiatives and care of the senior citizens. For example, a case of, let's say, 80-year-old woman going to gym every day should be publicized for others as a role model, rather than thinking that their life is over. So all these role models come in very handy, because it's all the attitude that matters. So RWS with their intercom facilities, helplines for the elderly, and should be, they need to be actively engaged with that. Another aspect is the role of the police, that is the women beat constables and otherwise. They could be asked to make regular rounds in the community to check for cases, genuine cases of discomfort, or for abuse, or for general interactions. Now, just to share with you, Delhi Police program of Parivartan was initiated with this intention, which was to address cases of domestic violence and cases of abuse of women and also the elderly, and it was very successful till, of course, some time back. I think it's not been running that, it's not that pervasive as it was earlier, but this we found was very important. And as a part of the Parivartan program, we had the women with constables who would initially in their uniform visit the community, and subsequently also in their civil dress, to, as I said, to ensure that the elderly are safe, and also to share with them their own contact, so that in case there's a need, they could be contacted. Then definitely we need more research on the needs and challenges faced by the elderly. And also, it could be by way of studying the impact of the various schemes that are there for elderly, even for studying the impact of the national policy for senior citizens. And so research on elderly and, of course, elderly women is much more desired to understand the nature of discrimination or abuse that the elderly face, and also the gender discrimination faced by women in their old age. And of course, a bit of research we have been doing here, and as a part of our discussions at the department, we've realized that, for example, the national policy on senior citizens, or for that matter, any other policy, for example, even the national policy on education that has recently come up, they do not have a provision for addressal of the pandemic. like the COVID-19. So if we are talking about, midterm appraisals of some of these policies, I think the government, which is the body making, the body which is into the social policies and public policies, they need to be told at high time that these components need to be introduced as a part of the policy making. That is, what do we do in the situations of the pandemic? For example, having said this, then I like to say, for example, the pandemic has shown us that how important it is for each one of us, and especially the elderly, to keep pace with information and technology. The pandemic has shown us the urgent need to familiarize ourselves with the latest technology so that we are connected with our people abroad. There have been cases known to us, and it reported also in the newspapers, that the elderlies, there were families where they were expecting their children to visit them just before the pandemic. So when the pandemic attacked, this mobility was not possible, and putting the senior citizens, in difficult situation for 2 years, and they did go through a tough time, more so when they were not very techno savvy. Those who were able to, of course, still take care, but those who were not familiar with the social media like Skype, Facebook, and other kinds of social media, they did face a bit of problem, especially during the pandemic. So maybe this aspect really needs to be knocked at the door of the government to say that these aspects need to be incorporated, and maybe the Ministry of IT needs to be looking into this aspect, and information technology needs to be made more pervasive. For example, even at the department, at times we find that things are not the way it has to be. So the situation that we have just gone through, and we are still into that, this needs to be the trigger point to make more people, pro-people policies, and in context of especially the elderly. Then the local PHCs, as Mala just said, and the health centers, they need to be more proactive. They need to have trained doctors. They need to be visiting the senior citizens in their neighborhood, or otherwise the entire area can be, surveyed and see where they are, and provide the services by way of monthly checkup or maybe weekly checkup as and when required. And also there could be, of course, some of these areas, like in Delhi, we have socialization groups where people get together they've set up their clubs or meeting points, and even the religious gatherings. So they get together, they talk. So things like initiatives like this needs to be encouraged, and probably government needs to look into it and set up great infrastructure where the families can get together, where the elderly could meet each other. Simple things, but they go a long way when we're talking about how life can be made more pro people, and especially with regard to the senior citizens. Coming to the rural areas, the Panchayati Raj institutions need to play a very prominent and active role in ensuring that the schemes for the elderly reach out to them. And we have NGOs which are working in the area. We have some of our social work students who have voluntarily taken up to work in that area. So database can be created there, and one of the main areas gets to be awareness and mission with regard to the schemes, government schemes, and how people can access them. That also applies to places, the cities also, here, what are the schemes for people, the senior citizens and people otherwise, and how they can be accessed. And chances are that especially the elderly women are not in know-how of such schemes, ignorant of them. Then they can be involved in self-help groups, and this would also help them in getting better oriented about the government programs and schemes for them. This is, of course, in context of what the previous speaker has said, the kind of challenges senior citizens face, and also what the speaker, I think, was Anand, who said that elderly people should not be seen as a liability, but as an asset, and they have to be taken seriously. And we know that they are an asset. It's just that, we need to take them seriously. And at times, some of these plays that we have at Sri Ram Center, or maybe even the Bollywood, they do portray the situation, the reality in a genuinely, and Bollywood can be one good way of putting across a message. The media can be a very important way of putting across a message. So I would say that we're coming towards the close of my talk. I would say that workshops like this need to be held more frequently for enhancing social functioning, for bringing about the attitudinal change for the family members as such, and of course senior citizens. And there have to be counseling services. Maybe that needs to be made more pro society. The counseling services are somewhere in our society. I've seen that in the schools, that anybody approaching the counselor or the social workers is seen as a stigma. But I think somewhere that message has to be spread. And I think it is being spread that we could be victims of depression without even realizing it. So accessing services of a counselor and similar services should be made, should be seen as something normal, because we're all human beings, and it needs to be seen something, that each one of us, a service that each one of us requires. Then the government needs to realize that there's a need for more daycare centers, there's a need for more old age homes, family counseling centers, family enrichment programs, more pro-people policies, and maybe corporate and universities could also think about pre-retirement counseling, where people could actually be also made to think about the kind of alternatives they could develop for themselves after they retire. So easy for me to say, but I think this would require more of serious thought, but it would go a long way in developing the kind of welfare states that India is a welfare state, but maybe, the kind of welfare state that each one of us would aspire to be living in. Then, of course, the housing, the schools of architecture needs to be, the architects need to be sensitive about the needs of the poor. So we could probably, in the public spaces, we could have escalators, we could have low height slabs, we could have emergency helplines, more pro-people police, and also, also the groceries. I mean, people who are in the department stores, the doctors, the chemists. I think they should be more sensitive when they are addressing senior citizen. Our transport needs to be more pro. Elderly by way of special buses or elderly compartments in the trains. And yes, so having said this, I'd like to just also, I can see Smita, but I think I do have a few more minutes, Smita. I have around 10-12 minutes.
Yes, you have time, Professor. Yes.
So I also feel tempted to say that there are success stories by way of NGOs who are doing a lot of good work with the senior citizens. So we have the in Delhi we have the Sulabh International, which is doing a very good work. The widows of Vrindavan. Then we have Seva, Self-Employed Women's Association Bank, Gujarat, which provides financial assistance to elderly women belonging to the lower economic strata. Then HelpAge, India's Vidarbha project, deals with reducing financial burden of elderly women. Yes, I need to not study this in detail, but yes, their Vidarbha project is quite known, and it's basically working with elderly women who are victims of farmer suicides in Maharashtra. Then many elderly persons get involved in the community and civic life through volunteering and active participation, and Sulabh International does promote that. So basically, the point is, if I conclude this, so aging is an unavoidable part of our lives, and it gets important that both men and women develop a positive outlook. So that these workshops play a very important role there. So they develop a positive outlook towards what their life, about their future life, and the preparation for this has to start in good time for successful aging. And as citizens of the society, we also need to be sensitive to the fact that we focus on the safety of the elderly or victim safety. We recognize and respect cultural and religious diversities, and professionals should be aware that language barriers and value differences may be there when we are working uh, with people, with the elderly. And definitely goes without saying that the elderly should be treated with respect and dignity, and that we should be sensitive to what is happening in our neighborhood. There could be elderly couple who is in the family, but who could be a victim of family abuse. We need to be sensitive to that. There could be small indicators like listening to maybe some kind of a noise on regular basis, which might indicate that the elderly is not very safe. Seeing them sitting in isolation, maybe in the park right opposite the residential area, or maybe other kind of abuses which one might see and might just ignore on the elderly. So they need to be made aware of that there are helplines. There is a helpline for the elderly, and that is accessible. And maybe the government needs to be also told that it's very important to that the helpline functions. And it's more pro people rather than saying that, all right, now press this button, now you'll be at this place, now press this one. So it has to be more pro people. So elderly should be treated with respect and dignity, and we need to be sensitive to our neighborhood. And something I said, research is needed to understand the nature of abuses so that adequate intervention can be planned. And something that I started with saying, that women's narrative should be sought and respected. So with this, I'll conclude my talk, and thank you very much. And over to Smita.
Thank you, Professor Pamela. Actually, to inform the other participants, Professor Pamela, I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, she had confirmed her presence as resource person. But as she has also shared with you, crisis occurred, and therefore she was dealing with all of that. But I personally think for this topic, based on your years of teaching experience, based on your your university collaborating with the government and civil society pertaining to work with elderly, as well as the research that you have conducted or you have guided pertaining to topics related to elderly. So drawing from that very updated kind of and holistic information you have been able to give, as in what direct work needs to be done with older people in terms of legislation or institutional settings for elderly, or how we build value education for elderly in our homes and through schools and educational institutions. And you also spoke about how advocacy for older people ke liye, that's one of the biggest roles that social work professionals have. Transport unke liye, ya better housing, use of technology, digital literacy sessions for the elderly. So or rights for older people, political empowerment of elderly. So isme social workers role as advocates, advocating in these different areas, ye aapne bataya hai. And through few examples you have shared how civil society also can come up and intervene with issues related to older people. We all understand that in India, developing countries like India, there are limitations in terms of resources that are there, in terms of people, academicians or politicians who are actually motivated, policymakers who are motivated, who want to work with the older people actively. These limitations are there, but despite that, university like Delhi University and College of Social Work, we are also very motivated ki we need to start training social work professionals to work more with the older people and in the field of aging, directly or indirectly. So I'm very thankful to Professor Pamela that, see, this is not the one and final session. This is a introduction. This is a kind of setting a foundation to much more sessions that we're going to have ahead, more specific sessions, more focused sessions, panel discussions that we're going to have for the alumni in the future. So moving on to next agenda point, I would like to ask if there are any specific questions or comments for Professor Pamela from the group here. Any questions? Okay, there are some comments, of course, that the session has been insightful and meaningful. Are there any questions or anything that any of the participants would like to highlight post this topic, social work interventions with the older persons? Anyone? Mr. Digambar is here. Mr. Yadnesh, Pallavi. Any questions for Professor? Okay, I take it to understand because it's more of a information sharing or information providing kind of session. Scope for questions are few. Of course, few comments have been received.
May I
yes.
speak? Am I
Yes.
audible? Yeah, this is
Yes.
Kalyani. I just wanted to say it was a very, very wonderful input and insight that has been given by Dr. Pamela. Thank you so much. And just wanted to share that when you were talking about the challenges faced by elderly today, and how it was in joint family and the nuclear family, and with the changing social scene, I was also reminded, it was a kind of reminder to me as a person, as a daughter, as a social worker and social work educator, that these challenges cut across all classes, castes, religions. So, and because I have seen how my mother struggled when she was staying alone, and it is just that it is not that that there will not be other family members who will want to help, but sometimes the changing situations are such that the needs and challenges have changed because of that. And as a social worker, I think we need to take this into account, and especially, as you said, women elderly have very specific problems which need to be looked into even at policy level. So sorry. So just wanted to thank you for a very insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalyani. And rightly said, at times we as social workers also feel, somewhere handicapped as to what to do. And how I wish that we as social workers can play a more active role. My neighbor doesn't know what is the kind of role that me as a social work educator can probably, I can perform. When his spouse passed away, and I did offer that, maybe I can help out when he was in the state of crisis. But, probably that kind of recognition that social work as a profession has to get, which is there in some of the Western countries. I think we still need to attain that. And of course, since there are, disparities, maybe in places like Mumbai, the social workers are more recognized, but in places like Delhi, I think we still need that recognition. But definitely to say that social workers, with the kind of training that they go through in the 2 years, they can really be an asset in elderly dealing with the kind of crisis that they go through, and also to help them into active aging. The preventive part of it gets to be very important, which social workers can really help them.
I think thank you so much, Kalyani, and thank you, Professor Pamela, for your response. So there is a comment that the sessions are definitely, very insightful. Also, there is certainly a need for advocacy on this emerging issue, that is all the kind of problems or concerns that elderly are facing. And especially because there's feminization of aging in countries across the world, and especially in India, needs of women elderly need to be highlighted. The procedure or process for raising these issues also need to be more community driven, especially from the grassroots level, from the rural areas, because I think they are neglected by the government. I agree, Mr. Cletus, to these 2 points. And I'm happy to share that even in College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, we have 2 courses that are offered. One subject at the bachelor's level, aging studies, and We have another paper in the master's senior second year level on perspectives on aging. So in this, we, exhaustively train students, provide knowledge, give them some skill sets so that they are aware of what are their roles to work with the older people. I think in other universities where they have a department of social work, they are also offering. We also have some diploma and certificate programs that are offered pertaining to geriatrics or gerontology that we are offering. I think all these are steps ahead showing there is need and more work. And for social work professionals to say that this is what we can do for older people.
Very true.
Smita,
Yes.
can I just speak?
Yes, Professor. Please go ahead.
Yeah. No, thank you, Pamela. That was a very insightful and enriching discussion presentation. What I would like to also comment here for the alumni members and for future programs in your institution is the fact that we also need to bring in a perspective that we don't have to see older people as in need of services, programs, policies. What I mean by that is that we have to also change our mindset by making or having programs which make the older people more independent, more autonomous, more to look after themselves so that they are self-reliant. There should be an element of empowerment which has to be generated, and our societies need to open ourselves that older people need their needs need to be met not by doling out things to them, but rather by them being equipped to handle things themselves. I mean, it's very important for the dignity and for respect of any person to have a self-esteem of the thing that I can do it, I'm capable, I can manage it. So you see our perspectives, yes, there are many who need special services, who need, but there are many who just need a change in mindset, a change in reaction from society, a change in perspective, which provides more dignity, provides more respect to them. And as people who are contributing or working towards changing the dynamics in aging societies, it is very important that we have literacy programs, we have technological digital literacy for older people, we have social skill development for older people, we have employment opportunities for older people, we have recreational opportunities for older people where they stand on their own, they enjoy on their own, they decide on their own what they need to do and how to do it and how to manage it. I mean, yes, societies do need to have certain programs for them, but we also in societies need programs which brings in their participation, their managerial skills, their organization, and that is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I completely agree. Would Professor Pamela want to respond?
No, I agree with whatever we've been discussing. So, and I think that was the beginning line of Anand, that they are an asset. They need to be seen as an asset, and probably somewhere, we need to put that in our minds right from the beginning. And we need to be prepared much in advance that we are definitely that old age is unavoidable. But how we exactly deal with this, it all depends on us. So, unlike in the West, where your children leave you much early and the families, the couple needs to know what they need to do subsequently. In India, that's not the case. Here, our children continue to stay with us, and all of a sudden, we might face a situation where you're just alone. So, we need to be much prepared in advance so that, when we enter that age, we are able to deal with it gracefully and more comfortably.
And look at the resource they are for families. In fact,
Yes.
in many families, they are the genuine caregivers, but we are not recognizing and giving credit to that role. So I think the demographics of us are also showing that older people, while they are living longer, they are also aging well. I mean, the kind of, yes, health problems, age-related issues come, but we are finding there is compression of morbidity taking place. So it comes in the last few years of the life of an individual. It is not throughout old age. As they turn 60, they don't fall ill, they don't become immobile, they don't lose their senses. It's much later in age when such things. So our conception, our perception, our images of aging need to change. And that's a very important component of the discourses we need to have in our society.
I'll just like to add here for everyone. So, there are ways by which we tend to propagate a certain message. And during my one of the workshops that I attended in Japan, so there was this representative from Vietnam, and so she shared that since the workshop was on dealing with violence against women, so she shared that how the sports players, for example, she spoke about the football player. She says that the jacket or shirt that they wear, so it has a message at the back: make home a safe space for women. So this kind of a message could be even for the elderly and other vulnerable groups, and that could be one of the ways by which we spread a message. And especially, cricket being a very favorite sport, it could be for that a shirt that the t-shirt that the cricketers wear, or maybe any kind of support. But that could be one way of spreading a message pro elderly, since we're talking about elderly present situation today here. So that could be one way of spreading a message for, apart from the hoardings that we might put.
Yeah, so like you already mentioned, media representation of older people has to be more positive. And there is another colleague of mine also who has given her valuable comment that she also sees older people more as a resource that can be harnessed rather than, of course, we need to look at issues. There are a proportion of elderly who will require services and welfare. But I think most of the other elderly are a resource. So more of part-time jobs, employment. Also, there is Professor Monir Alam. He's from Delhi. He is an economist. And based on his research, he has seen that elderly are a market. I mean, they are a very huge market they are providing in the general market scenario that we have. So they are definitely a resource, and of course media also can be harnessed. And there is another comment, I would like to read it. So Meetha Bole, she has commented that she works with an organization in Singapore which works in the community with elderly people who are staying alone, especially for their health and medical issues. Then the emotional support that the medical staff provided when they visited the home, there was tiffin service provided, all of that. So she feels that in India, similar lines work can be done. So aging in place, how it can be propagated rather than, proposing more old age homes. Also in another country, the name she is unable to remember, she heard about how the people contribute through community hours when they are young people. And one of the groups that they volunteer with is with the elderly. Yes, community engagement for older people. I think Cletus also had said the same point. Rather than the government and civil society, they may be doing, but it's not more sustainable. Community people understanding revising their values about the older people and understanding the kind of social capital older people have and how elderly have to give back to the elderly. How the younger generation have to give back to the elderly. I think this also is very important when we are talking about social work interventions with the elderly, especially in the profession or field of social work. Any other questions? I think we've had a good discussion because what Professor Pamela has shared has thrown up certain points for all of us to reflect on, and specific points we are able to bring up. So if there are no more questions, I think we can proceed towards the vote of thanks, and the vote of thanks I will be providing it. Before that, before I forget, I will share the link for providing your feedback. Just give me a minute. So in the chat, I will share you a link, and please, I request you provide your feedback about the whole program, how you felt, whether it was useful or not, beneficial or not, and also about the resource person's inputs. We would really require your feedback on that. So moving on to the vote of thanks, this is a small program that we have organized for the NN alumni, but a very impactful program we wanted to have it as. And when we spoke to the alumni group that we have through Cletus and Shama, they were keen on having 3-4 topics, a kind of series of refresher workshops, disability, elderly, health, and another on community organization. So the choice itself that is made by the alumni, it reflects, that they are very aware of what inputs they want to receive. And firstly, I would like to thank each of the NN alumni who have registered and they have participated throughout the session. My thanks goes to you. Also, this session that we were planning, we have a small team, and of course the support and encouragement of Dr. Lidwin Dias, our principal, and then the small team that comprised of my colleagues, Dr. Vajanta Anand, Mr. Cletus, Miss Anna Assisi, and Miss Shama. They were responsible for looking into the publicity aspect and coordinating with the Alumni Association. I would like to thank them because without these efforts, the participants wouldn't have registered and been part of today's event. I would also like to extend thanks to Mr. Praveen, our librarian. He was in charge of creating the Zoom link and providing to us. Also, my thanks are to Greta, our accounts person, who has helped us with the disbursement of fund for this program. And most important, my thanks and heartfelt gratitude to both Professor Mala Kapoor Shankar Das as well as Professor Pamela Singla, excellent resource persons. I really trouble them. Big, vast topics, but they had to really put things in a nutshell, put things in a perspective, and put it across in our first refresher workshop. So they have been really graceful, very magnanimous persons, very down to earth. So I thank you both for a very enriching and enlightening session that each of you had with the NN alumni today. With this, I formally announce the close of the refresher workshop on social work interventions with older persons. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you. And thanks everyone.
There is a request for a group photo once again in the chat box.
But then unless they make the separate entities, कहता नहीं वो नहीं होगा because fire brigade has already objected. They will not allow separate entities or something. तो कहता कि वो तो होगा नहीं तो मैं कहता then what are they taking over? The most
Is it done, Cletus? Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day, all of you, and I hope these inputs will help you work with the older people when your turn comes. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Mala, for introducing me here.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank
Bye.
you all for joining.
अभी तो फिर मैं भी सोच रहा हूँ कि maybe just wait.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.